Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's April 20th, 2024, and today we're going to be answering the question, what happens if you're in a LDS or Mormon Church Relief Society stake presidency and it lands you in a psychiatric hospital? And that's what we're covering today. To give you just a tiny bit of background, we recently did a bishop's panel on Mormon Stories that was incredibly well received, even by believing faithful Mormons. And people want more. So we've been putting out a call for a Relief Society President's panel, and we've got so many great applicants. We've filled it. We've got our panel. We've got the date set. It's coming in a few weeks. But there were so many great stories that we wanted to cover others as well. And so today we're going to be interviewing Lori Young. Hey, Lori.
Hey, John.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And yeah, Lori was in a stake Relief Society presidency, and on the thumbnail we called it her LDS Relief Society nightmare because, in fact, it landed her in a psychiatric hospital. And I don't mean to be flip about it, but that's your story. Mm-hmm. So thanks for being willing to be vulnerable.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And if that weren't enough, we also have my incredible partner, Margie. Hey, Margie.
Hi there.
Glad to have you.
I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. It's great to have you. Okay. And Margie's been kind of managing a lot of this behind the scenes. So thank you so much for making that happen.
Yeah.
And thanks to everyone who has applied. We have a new application process for Mormon Stories podcast. And so many people have applied, not just for the Relief Society panel, but we've got a ton of other panels we're taking applications for. And we're just taking general applications as well for long-form interviews. So if you want to do your Mormon story, go to the mormonstories.org website, fill out the application, and we'd love to consider you. Also, if you don't mind, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this episode, and we're on several other social media channels as well. Those subscriptions really help the algorithms. Anyway, without any further ado, Lori, before we begin, we often like to ask our guests to state an intention because it's very easy, especially for believing Mormons, to make false assumptions about why someone wants to tell their story. And so we like to give people a chance to be very explicit about what they are and they aren't trying to do, or maybe what they aren't trying to do and what they are trying to do by telling their story.
Great, yeah. So my intention sharing my story and being interviewed is, one, to talk about the patriarchy in the church. You'll hear a lot of that in regard to my experience in the Stake Relief Society presidency and the damaging effects it has on both men and women. So I want to highlight that, and then also talk about my mental health journey, how certain things within the church led to, like a generalized panic disorder, which eventually led to me going to a psychiatric hospital, which ended up saving my life. So I want to provide hope to people out there who might be going through this dark period of a faith crisis and feeling like there is no hope, to let them know that help is there, kind of destigmatize getting help, and provide hope that, there is joy on the other side of all this.
Beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we're really grateful because it's the vulnerability and the courage of our guests it's the engine that runs Mormon Stories. So thank you. Okay. So today we're going to take a slightly different approach than maybe we all generally do. Instead of going deep into each kind of phase of your life, we're going to have you give some background, but just the background that kind of informs the story you're going to tell.
Yeah.
So let's start about, your Mormon story, but tell us the things about your childhood, adolescence, and early adulthood that you feel like really set the stage for this this horrible experience.
Yeah. Sure. So yeah, I was born and raised in Logan, Utah. So lived there my whole entire life. Went to Utah State. Go Aggies, right? Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that contributed to my life and my experience as I started questioning the church is I was raised in quite an Orthodox home. Very like I would say, picture perfect Mormon home. So my dad was a bishop 3 times through my childhood, a singles adult ward at Utah State, our home ward, and then a married ward at Utah State as well. So, and I would say we lived Mormonism to a T. We really did. I mean, every week, family home evening, we went to every activity. My dad was always in leadership the whole time. So as far as like any sort of questioning or having doubts or even like asking a question about something like, I don't understand this, there really was not any space for that. Mm-hmm. There was no question about getting married in the temple, being active, saying yes to every calling. So yeah, there was no questioning there, and there still isn't. I'm the only one, 6 children, and it's just me. So, so that kind of set the stage for things we'll talk about later in regard to why I felt there was no hope for life when I started questioning and leaving the church, was just not wanting to disappoint the family and the people that I loved. So, but I would say my childhood was fantastic. Like, it was a wonderful childhood, loving parents, loving family, really great. So,
Okay. So the traditional ideal Mormon childhood, that sounds like it's all going well so far.
Yeah. Everything went really great for me. A total believer, right? Loved primary, loved all that stuff. I started having issues when I started going to Young Women's.
That's 12 years old?
Yeah, which is 12 years old is when you start going as a girl. And especially when I started going, I don't know how it is now, but this would be 35 years ago. The focus was always on just getting to the temple and getting married in the temple. That was everything.
Yep.
So most lessons, that's what we talked about. Being worthy to the temple, preparing for marriage, preparing for motherhood. That was very much the focus. And for me, I've always considered myself a little feminist. Like, I've always had that little streak in me. Always very much felt like the black sheep in my family growing up. Always. Because I was kind of the loud, outspoken one. The only time I ever got in trouble, honestly, from my dad is because I talked too much when guests came over. So I was
interesting.
kind of the open one, yeah. So when we started having a bunch of lessons on that in Young Women's, I would get very bugged. Like I remember we had one lesson on education. And the teacher, the instructor in Young Women's was talking about how important it was that we get an education, we go to college, in case our husbands died or in case we got a divorce. And I'm like, I want to just get an education. Like, it really made me angry. So I would say that's when I started kind of questioning and feeling like things were not equal, and then we would go Wednesday for the midweek activities. So with the youth organizations in the LDS church, they always have midweek activities, and we'd go there and the boys would be playing basketball in the gym and we would be back like learning how to make bread or something, and I'm like, what is going on? So those little things started really bugging me during kind of my teenage years.
Can I ask you a question about that? So if you ask like a Mormon church PR rep today, does the Mormon church encourage its young women to get an education? They would say, oh, yes, we have doctors who are women and we have lawyers who are women and we love we have high, college attendance rates of Mormon women. I don't think they would own up to the fact that your experience might be common. Right. How in the world did you end up feeling that education was discouraged as a teenage young woman?
Yeah, I think because it was talked about so much. Like, I don't know if you recall, but this is the time Gordon B. Hinckley, I think, was just becoming prophet around that time. And I remember, in fact, he actually gave a talk about women or girls getting an education. And I think because they want to give that persona. But there's always with the caveat at the end, like, get an education so that you'll be a better mother. Get an education so that you're prepared financially if your husband gets laid off or if you get a divorce or something like that. So it's like, yes, they encourage education, but it's always the underlying reason that has to do with your marriage or being a better mother. It's not, I don't believe getting an education just to be smarter for a woman or to advance your career is ever really promoted that way, right?
Or because education's enjoyable,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Or it can be, yeah.
Yeah. So I always felt like it was encouraged, but for other purposes than I wanted.
But funneled to traditional gender roles within
Always.
a traditional Mormon family.
Always.
Okay.
It's like, get the education, and then you end up back in the place that we originally wanted you.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So as you started noticing the basketball for the boys and the bread making for the girls and education career de-emphasis, how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, at that point, it was just questions, like little things that bugged me, I was still very strong in the faith, 100% believed Joseph Smith, God, Jesus, everything. Did not question that at all. I do remember around this time is when I learned about polygamy and Joseph Smith's polygamy in seminary. So, of course, seminary graduate. And we were doing Doctrine and Covenants that year and, D&C 132. And people were asking questions about it in class. And the seminary
For
teacher...
those who have never been Mormon, do you have a couple verses that you can give to illustrate what D&C 132 might have said that bothered you?
Yes.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I could guess if that's helpful.
Yeah. So D&C 132 covers what they call the new and everlasting covenant. And as people in the class were asking questions about that, good for the seminary teacher. He was honest. He did say that it refers to celestial marriage, which is plural marriage, right? So I think a lot of instructors do gloss over that and just say, oh, that's celestial marriage. It refers to the new and everlasting covenant, which is celestial marriage in the LDS temple. But because there is also surrounding those verses, it kind of does talk about plural marriage. So that did come up in the class. And so that's when I first learned that Joseph Smith practiced plural marriage, because of course it's not, you don't learn about this in church. And so I remember going to my mom, and I was furious. I could not believe this was a thing. I just thought it was disgusting, and I thought it put women in a very subservient place, kind of captive in these marriages. So I was talking to my mom about it, and she's like, I don't like it either. And if your dad ever did it, I'd be so mad, but it's just one of those things you just have got to put on your shelf. Like, God will take care of it. Yeah. The traditional, put it on the shelf, right?
Right.
And that was it. That was the answer.
Yeah. And when you say God disgusted, we have a really good series on our LDS discussion series about Mormon polygamy. Highly recommend it. But D&C 132 is bona fide Mormon scripture revelation from Jesus to Joseph. And it's got language like, if a man has a virgin and desires another, as long as she's a virgin, she shall be given to him.
Yep.
And it's just like, and he can have up to 10. I'm making the words up, but it's just like, it talks about women like they're cattle or chattel, and it's very, and it talks about them as if they will be assigned and exchanged, and they're just commodities.
Exactly.
And this is in our scripture. So
exactly.
It's very disturbing language. I recommend, we'll have Julie put in the show notes a link to maybe an episode or two of that, so you can really get a sense. And most Mormons, I don't think they ever really pay attention to it, because it is objectively revolting. Margie's shaking her head. But somehow most people just read on by and aren't bothered by it, but you were.
Right, exactly. And I think you're right. And I think this is the case with a lot of things in Mormonism. People really gloss over stuff. They don't truly study it and read all of it. Yeah. If you read all of D&C 132, it is pretty revolting. Yeah. And that's another thing that started bugging me, because I was, a seminary student. I read all the assignments, right? So I read all the scriptures. I studied it and everything. And you talked about the mention of virgins in the scriptures. One thing that really started bugging me is I realized whenever women were referred to, which is rarely, their sexual status was always associated. It was always a virgin woman, the Virgin Mary. You get a virgin.
Major descriptor.
Yes, always.
And it never said the men don't have to be virgins.
Yeah. That's right.
Ever.
And what if the women aren't virgins? Are they,
well, then they're just nothing,
Yeah.
So things like that started really bugging me in the scriptures, not to mention that the scriptures are largely absent of women, except for when we're talking about their virginity.
Yeah, I think the Book of Mormon names like 4 women and like 250 men. Some crazy disparity.
Exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
And I started noticing those things, and it really started bothering me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, but it's rare. Weirdly, it's rare. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So where did that take you?
So going through high school, still a total believer in everything. Went to Utah State, met my husband there in the institutional choir, New Horizons. Don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah.
So that's where we met. Really incredible guy, still married. 30 years this year.
Oh, congrats. We're
which is
32.
Good. Yeah. So we have been through it.
I can imagine.
Yes, as you guys have too. But anyways, so we met, of course, getting married in the temple, had a quick engagement, got married at the normal Utah Mormon age of 19, a child.
19.
A child. And now I'm like, I cannot believe, but it was very normal, right? That's what you did. But the first major like crack in my shelf, which was getting heavy with things, was when I went through the temple the first time, 2 weeks before we got married. And this, they've changed the endowment ceremony quite a bit since this time. But when I went through the first time, I felt so betrayed. Like, I could not believe I'm sitting around with people I love, my fiance, the person I'm marrying, my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, ward members. There was a room full of people. And not one person had told me what I was going to be doing, the covenants I was going to be making, what I was going to be participating in. And I was angry.
Which covenants disturbed you or made you angry or?
Well, the whole thing, in my opinion, is extremely culty. I mean, it's weird, right? I couldn't believe, like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I can't believe my parents do this. Like, this is so weird.
Like the clothing, and y'all can Google
the
Mormon temple clothing. The women, when you were going through, the women were wearing veils.
Yes.
Men were what?
Wearing the baker's hats or whatever. Yeah,
Green
you look over at my husband and I'm like, Pillsbury Doughboy, what is going on?
Yeah.
With aprons.
Yeah. So the clothing, and then of course, there's signs, tokens, like weird things you're doing together, repeating things together, passwords. You learn about none of this in mainstream Mormonism because, of course, everyone's under covenant not to talk about it. So there's no informed consent. I mean, you go through there, and at the beginning they say, if anyone feels like they can't, go through this or live up to the covenants they're going to make at the altars of the temple this day, you can get up and leave now. Well, that's at the beginning. You have no idea what you're going to be doing.
That's right.
And so there's no informed consent whatsoever. And by the time you start into it, I mean, you can't get up and leave. My whole family was there. I mean, aunts, uncles, ward members. I was getting married in 2 weeks. Like, I wanted to leave, but you really can't. So to answer your question, the things that bugged me most, I hated how they separate the men and women. So you sit on opposite sides, right? But then paying attention to every word, which I did, at the time, they have changed this now, but at the time, women hearkened to, or covenanted to hearken to the counsel of their husband as their husband hearkened to the counsel of God. And I sat there and I'm like, oh my gosh, so I have no direct link to God. Everything for me has to go through my husband and then to God. That's it. That was it. And I was so mad. I was so mad because I'm like, I can't do anything without a guy. It has to go through the guy. The guy gets to talk to God. They're holy enough to talk to God. I am not. I have to go through a man. And that infuriated me. And then there's a part in the temple ceremony called the True Order of Prayer. And this is where a group of people go to the front. They stand in a circle. They do all the signs and tokens, which is super weird. And then they pray that the temple worker prays directly to God, and it's like you're talking directly to God. Well, before they start that, they ask all the women in the room to veil their faces. I was so angry because for me, I'm like, why am I veiling my face? Am I not clean enough for God to see me? Because like in the true order of prayer, that's when you're addressing God, right? And for some reason, I have to cover my face and the men don't. So does that mean like I'm so impure, I'm so dirty, I'm so horrible, God can't see my face? Or does that just mean when we talk to God, I need to disappear? And those two things just made me so angry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I left that day, and it's the first time I'd ever sworn to my husband.
Really?
We walked out the temple doors, and I looked at him and I said, "What in the hell was that?"
Whoa.
I was so mad.
Because I do think those we've interviewed a lot of people on Mormon Stories that didn't like the temple ceremony, pretty much almost all.
Yeah.
Very, very, very few people in the 1,900 hours of interviews I'd done say, I love the temple. Most were disturbed by it.
Yeah.
But very few felt like they were safe, not just in terms of how it might be received, safe to criticize it, but even they didn't feel safe in front of God to vocalize that they were disturbed with it. So it's sort of like that blame reversal. It must be me. I must need to work harder, go harder, because surely it can't be God created a bad temple ceremony.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because it comes from God.
Yeah.
You know? So the fact that you vocalize that to the person, maybe you hadn't quite married him yet, or maybe you just married him, that's really unique and commendable, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty honest. I say what I think a lot, which gets me into trouble. But
Like Margie just stopped going. Like Margie, how many times did you go in the 25 years we were active in the church? Did you choose to go to the temple?
yeah.
I think I went maybe twice.
Really? Oh, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous because, you talked about the Relief Society presidency, enemy in the psych ward. I mean, of course, there was a lot more going on with that, but the temple was a big contributor to that because what we did is we ended up going every month for the next 20 years. We went every single month.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Which really damaged me so much. I'm still healing from it.
Wow.
But so I talked to my husband. I talked to my mom. I considered like calling off the wedding. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I don't believe this. I talked to my mom. She set up an appointment with me with the temple president's wife, the temple matron, at the Logan Temple. So I met with her, and she said all the normal stuff, right? It is different, but it's of God. You just need to pray about it. You just need to read your scriptures, try harder.
Right.
It'll get more comfortable over time, all the normal things. So I loved my husband. I wanted to get married. I didn't want to call it off. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to double down. We're going to do this. We're going to go every month. It's going to get easier, but this is what we're supposed to do. And so we got married, and for the next 20 years, I went every single month. And I have to tell you, every time my husband and I would be mad at my husband for at least 2 or 3 days after every time we went to the temple. Because he was the representation of the priesthood of men in the church. And I remember, if you recall, you sit on opposite sides, and I'd be sitting there and he'd look over at me like with these eyes like, I'm so sorry. And I'm looking at him like, fuck you. Sorry, did I just say that? I didn't think that, but I was so mad. I would look, and I know he was just trying to I know this is hard, and he was being sympathetic, which I appreciated, but he represented that to me, and I would look over at him like, I hate all this so bad. I hated it. It never got easier. They say keep going, keep doing everything you're supposed to do. It's going to get easier. You're going to feel that peace. You're going to find that peace. No.
That's right.
No, I'm telling you, I went every month for 20 years. Because I didn't know not going was an option, right? And it never got easier. It got, in fact, worse.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
For my graduate work, I studied obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety and phobias and stuff. And, the answer to that is always exposure. In other words, if there's something that you're uncomfortable with, like being social, then be social, because that's how you get better.
Yeah.
You just do the thing that makes you uncomfortable. That's fine if the thing is healthy.
Yeah.
But it's not fine if the thing is unhealthy.
Yeah.
Because if you just keep doing the thing that's unhealthy, it just damages you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm already getting why you might end up in a psychiatric unit if you're just not just uncomfortable with it, but you're making yourself do it regularly.
Yes.
That's torture. It's
Yes.
literally torture.
It was.
Every month.
Yeah.
It was.
Every month.
Psychological torture. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
It was, yeah. So it was pretty awful. But yeah, so over the next, 10 years at least, we continued doing everything a normal, very active Mormon family would, full tithing, attending the temple, saying yes to callings, all of that stuff, had children. One thing that is a little bit interesting is I did divert from the regular Mormon woman path a little bit in that I always wanted to work. I always wanted to have a career. And so after I had my first child, I did try to stay home for about 6 months and hated it so much. And so I told my husband, I'm like, I cannot do this. I can't do this. So we talked about daycare and things like that. But ultimately, my husband decided to actually quit his job. And he stayed home with our girls for 12 years. And was a stay-at-home dad. Yeah.
Oh, what a shift.
So that was
In motion.
huge, yeah.
And in Mormonism, that's a radical act.
It is.
It was radical,
Yeah.
and we'll get to the stake release study presidency in a bit, but she had a lot of issues with that, the woman I served with. And I would often get asked, when I would go to like midweek enrichment activities or, you meet someone new in the war and they'd be like, oh, what does your husband do? It's the first question you get asked. And I'm like, oh, well, he stays home with our girls and I work in tech, And I had more than once someone ask me if my husband was mentally disabled or physically disabled, because why else
Wow.
would he be home? Yeah, which I
Wow.
found so offensive. I mean, my husband's, he's incredible. He's a college graduate. He was a social worker. He's a teacher now. But yeah, people would I was asked that question more than once.
One thing that can I just say that I think is so beautiful about that is that's what we want in marriage. And it sounds like you're both in this still highly conditioned place, and your marriage is conditioned too. It's not just like this religious overtone in when it comes to spirituality or Sundays or family life. There's that in your own marriage. And what I love about it is clearly in some way you were differentiated enough to go needs-based and fit, which I view as ideal, like you're partnershiping.
Yes.
It's like, here's what I'm good at. Here's what, this isn't a great fit for my mental health. I actually feel really driven in this way. Yeah, well, I don't. Or at this point, and really working together. And it seems like in some ways, like a different marriage was born, let alone a family life in that moment. That was your own.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that, like you said, that partnership, the team, being a team was key.
Yeah.
Like we knew we wanted certain things for our girls and we worked together to make sure each of our needs were met while still taking care of the family.
Yes.
And in a lot of ways that was very difficult in a lot of ways, because I don't know if you recall, but around our early married life is when the Proclamation on the Family came out. And
Tell our viewers who've never been Mormon just what a problem or two might have been with that statement.
there were a lot.
A problem or two.
So the Proclamation on the Family, just for those who don't know, is it came out in the mid to late 1990s, I believe. And it was basically scripture, doctrine that came out from the first presidency of the church. Gordon B. Hinckley was the prophet at the time. And it really was this statement on what the family should be, a God-ordained family. And it was very focused around gender roles. It was very focused around the role of the mother, the father, the husband, the wife, and the nuclear family with a man, a woman, children, right? And I really struggled with that. In fact, we both did, because it very clearly states that the woman's role is to nurture, right?
The husband is to protect, preside and provide. Right?
Yes.
So it's the protect. I'm the boss. I'm
the boss,
presiding.
yeah.
And I've got to go work to provide. And the woman's role.
Nurture the children. I think it even says something around primary nurture of the children, or providing those needs for your children.
Yeah.
And so we actually did struggle with that, because we're like, oh, are we like breaking commandments here? I remember like talking to my dad about it, because I saw my dad as very much a church authority. And he was like, well, there is some wiggle room there. You guys are both still living everything within the church, and, so it's okay. But we did struggle with that because, everyone printed them out and hung them on their walls. Like, this was like big time. It was scripture. It could be like with the Doctrine and Covenants. And so we kind of struggled with that. But then also it made me angry as well, because I never, and I mean, my kids will especially say this, I am not the nurturer in our family. Like, that's not my gig. My husband's a first grade teacher. He's fantastic with children. I've always had a career. I've always been in academics, and I mean, I feel like I'm a good mother and I love my children, but he's more the softer one in the family. And so, yeah, I just always felt like a black sheep. Like, I just do not fit this mold, and everything I'm being told I'm supposed to be, I am not that way. And I don't really want to be that way, but like, this is my God ordained role, So things like that, the proclamation on the family, I really hated that because, yeah, we had to choose to like not be perfect or not be what we were supposed to be.
Yeah. And to make it even worse, historians have established that the genesis of the proclamation on the family was because the church was worried about the spread of gay rights. And the only way legally they were going to be able to oppose gay rights is if they had enshrined doctrinally some sort of declaration that established what a family and a legitimate marriage was, so that then they could say this forcing us to allow and support same-sex marriage, it's against our doctrine. There wasn't enough in Mormon scripture, in the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants, to be able to have sort of that legal basis.
Yeah.
And so literally the proclamation of the family began as like a memorandum written by lawyers to justify anti-same-sex marriage legislation.
Wow.
And then it's like, oh, we got to formalize this so that then we have legal standing later.
Yeah.
And that's literally the genesis of the proclamation of the family.
Which is unreal. Yeah. Because I think you're right. I think it starts with like defining marriages between one man and one woman.
That's how it starts.
Yeah. Which I also thought was super hypocritical, because I'm like, oh, marriages between one man and one woman? Why did Joseph Smith have 30?
Or Brigham 50.
Yeah. Like, is the church really the entity to be talking about what a traditional marriage is?
Yeah.
Because I don't really think they have that in their history. Like,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's just like now the temple's eating at you, and the proclamation of the family's eating at you, the church culture's eating at you. This isn't shaping up well.
No.
For your mental health.
No. So over this time, I mean, things are going pretty good on the surface, right? But these things are all eating at me. So it was around this time, around 2004, 2005, is when, in my ward, I was in the Ward Relief Society presidency at the time. And I was over the teachers, the instructors. And so when an instructor wouldn't show up, I would just have to impromptu teach, which was fine. Like, I'm comfortable presenting and things like that. So one Sunday, the Stake Relief Society president was visiting. Our instructor didn't show up, so I got up and taught. And anyways, I guess she was impressed and wanted to call me to be her counselor in the Stake Relief Society presidency.
Can we just inform our Never Mormons, what is the Relief Society?
Oh, yeah.
And how is it structured at a ward level? And then what does that mean for a stake? What does that mean at a stake level? Because 70% of our audience has never been Mormon.
Okay. Yeah. So the Relief Society is the women's organization within the church. So the structure of church when I attended was everyone met initially all together in one room for a sacrament meeting. And then you would split, and the men would go to their priesthood meetings. The women would go to their Relief Society meetings.
On Sundays, right?
On Sundays, yeah. So, of course, it's women's meetings. The lessons are going to be focused a lot around women and what they're supposed to be doing, right? And so,
isn't there a homemaking night?
Yes, they called it, I don't know what they call it now. They changed it to enrichment, which was like a midweek activity. It used to be called homemaking.
Yeah.
I don't know what they call it now. But yeah, so on Sundays at the ward level, which is like a congregation level, your congregation. So there will be, 20, 30 women in a room, and you are instructed by other women. It's the only place besides with the children where, typically women instruct. And then the stake level is basically, in a stake, there's usually anywhere between like 10 to 12, 13 wards or congregations that then roll up to the stake level. So if you're in like a ward relief society presidency, you're kind of handling the women's organization within the ward under the direction of the priesthood. You never handle anything on your own. And then if you're in the stake one, you basically have all of the ward relief society presidencies kind of rolling up to the stake.
Yeah, so a stake is like a Catholic diocese. It's multiple congregations.
Multiple congregations.
And every presidency has a president, a relief society president, and then two counselors.
Two counselors, and typically a secretary, yeah.
A secretary, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, so that's like your, one of the top 3, quote, highest ranking women in, 10 to 12 congregations in your area. That's kind of a pretty significant level of responsibility for women.
For women, yeah. I was going to say, as high as you can go for women, right?
In what area is this?
This is in West Jordan, Utah.
Okay.
So now we're in West Jordan.
Yeah, we're in West Jordan, Utah.
So that's Salt Lake City Valley, West Side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Very highly concentrated Mormon there. Yeah. Okay. So, so within the stake, the one thing I'll point out also for Never Mormons is the Relief Society, although they have their own Relief Society president and counselors, it's always under the direction of the priesthood leaders. So no decision can be made by the Relief Society president without approval from the stake president, who is a man. Right?
That
you
is
have to have the
important
priesthood
to clarify,
Yes.
yeah.
So if Relief Society president wants to select her own counselors, can she just select her own 2 counselors?
No. She can provide suggestions or recommendations to the stake president, then they have to approve it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Do you control your own budget?
No, and it's very small.
Okay.
Very small.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's all under the direction of the priesthood men.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a real honor, right? And maybe it's validation. You're a working mom, a working Mormon mom, and yet you're getting promoted in the church.
Yeah.
I'm just making stuff up. I don't know.
No, you're accurate. You're accurate. And kind of like what I saw my role was, I can show that there's another way, right? So I kind of saw it as, I am different. I am different. I do have a career, and I'm also in this leadership position. So maybe I can impact the culture, right? Maybe I can help promote some change and some more progressive ideas within this leadership position.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
I'm like, I so feel that. And how does this play out?
But that's what I thought. I mean, at the time, you think every calling is inspired by God.
Yeah.
And so in my Mormon head, I thought, maybe God put me here for a reason to help open up minds and help to, allow for more room within the role of women and help to influence
It's like you feel like it's almost an endorsement.
Yes.
Of sorts, you know?
Like I was put here for a purpose, and this is my purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I can already tell this doesn't end well.
This does not end well. So the Stake Relief Society president, so this would have been 2005. And so almost 20 years ago. And for anyone who was active in the Mormon church back then, the focus, there was a huge focus around modesty. The modest is hottest craze,
Mm-hmm. And to a Mormon male leader, what does modesty mean?
Modesty is covering your garments, which means you're not wearing tank tops. You've always, you've got to have sleeves. You've got to have stuff down to your knees. No tight clothing. It's very much focused around what they can see of your body.
And these are, I'm sure, rules for men, correct?
No. I mean, their garments need to be covered too, but I mean, when did you have a talk on modesty?
Yeah, never.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was this huge focus for women.
Yeah.
And it was around this time too that stores like, Siegel Book and Tape in Utah, it's a store here in Utah, a Mormon store, they started selling like the and then the Downey's tees that they started selling like these cap T-shirts that had these cap sleeves,
right.
and everything and they would have, modest is hottest, modest clothing for,
Modest
teenagers, modest bathing suits. Yeah. It was kind of a craze then. Yeah. It's not so much that way anymore, I have noticed. As I've seen pictures of people wearing bikinis now who are active in the church, that was not a thing back then.
No.
Like that was, if you wore a bikini back then, you were not
It's
good.
still that way in many parts of Mormonism.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Which is insane, yeah. But so for this Stake Relief Society president, she was crazy, by the way. But she was obsessed with modesty. Obsessed. For grown women. We are talking grown adult women.
Margie and I call them grown-ass women.
Grown-ass women, yes. Grown-ass women being told how to dress to activities. And then that also extended down to the young women's. She also thought because young women who, for those who don't know, it's between the ages of 12 and 18 in the church. She thought because they will be going to Relief Society, they were also under her purview. And so she would have us meet with the Stake Young Women's president.
Interesting.
And that would be the topic of conversation, which would be modesty. So we not only focused on it for the grown-ass women, but also for the young women and the girls in the stake as well.
Did that strike you as unusual that you were meeting with young women, the young women's leaders too, and trying to,
Yeah, because I thought, why?
Seems very
unusual. They have their own presidency. They have their own leadership. We're, like, our calling is the women.
Yeah.
But we even went to girls' camp and everything as the Stake Relief Society presidency.
So interesting. I have not ever heard of that.
Very weird. Very weird. Yeah.
And can you give us an example, one or two examples of how the Stake Relief Society president would police grown women in terms of their clothing?
Yeah.
Yes. So we had, several meetings, and this was the topic of most of our meetings. It always came up. So the things that would bother her is she would talk a lot about, women who wore denim to church, a denim skirt or a denim jumper, as that was not okay. And then her big thing was also nylons or like pantyhose, tights. And at the time in the summer, of course, I didn't wear, you wear sandals and a skirt. And she actually pointed me out one time that I did not have my legs covered.
Wow, this really is next level.
Oh, it like Handmaid's Tale next level. And one time I asked her, I said, why do I need to wear nylons? Like, why is that important to you? They're hot. And she's like, well, we meet with the priesthood a lot, and it's not comfortable for them to see
your direct
bare
skin.
legs. Yeah. And I'm like,
direct skin.
Yeah. So during this time, I'm getting increasingly frustrated and like very, my inner feminist is just screaming. And so I would challenge her in meetings, which she did not like, right? The other members of the presidency kind of just didn't say anything, I was the youngest one out of the presidency at the time in my early 30s. And so those things bothered her. And then she started talking about women wearing capris, like, calf length.
So the garments actually are covered with capris.
Completely. Mm-hmm. The garments are completely covered with capris. But for some reason, she had this issue with capris being worn to the midweek activities. Not even to church, not to church, to the midweek activities. Mm-hmm. So these are the things she kind of focused on.
Capris are just like pants that like narrow short, to the ankle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or they come like mid-calf.
Mid-calf.
Like mid-calf, but cover the garments.
And she didn't like capris.
No, she thought they were immodest.
So how did this affect, what was the trickle down to this? Because she can have issues with all of these things, right? Or personal opinions or preferences. How did this actually affect, did it start appearing in lessons? Did she want it, what was the trickle down?
Yeah, so it did start appearing in lessons like when we visited stakes, or visited wards, and she wanted us to focus on that. And then when it really came to a head is she decided we needed to implement an actual policy from the stake with a dress code for church and for the midweek enrichment activities.
Wow.
And this policy was restricted women from wearing, of course, tank tops and capris and shorts to the midweek activities, and then requested that they always wear nylons, avoid denim on Sundays. And so she talked about how we're going to present this policy. And so I challenged her, and I even brought like a couple scriptures from the Book of Mormon that talked about, I can't remember what they are now, but accepting people as they are. And like, that's not very Christ-like. We should just be glad that people are coming to the activities. We should make them feel welcome, make them feel comfortable, no matter what they're wearing. Doesn't matter. They're there. They're choosing to show up. Like, we should show them love. We shouldn't focus on this. And she just didn't want to hear anything. Even I remember coming one time, I was so nervous. I'd even like prepared scriptures and like quotes from prophets to share about inclusivity and making a warm place for people, because I'm like, I'm going to get her to change her mind on this using doctrine, and she just would not be deterred. So one meeting she comes and she says, okay, we've got this policy. I've got it typed up, and she brought the letter. And she says, I've got the stake presidency's signature on it, because everything has to be done with the priesthood, right? And what we're going to do, she went to Kinko's and got thousands of copies of the letters printed. And each member of the presidency was to go to 4 wards, because we had 12 wards or congregations in the stake at the time. We were each to go to 4 wards in the Relief Society meeting and read the letter and present it to the women. I was sick about this. Like, my anxiety was sky high. I was already questioning things, the proclamation on the family, hating the temple, and then this experience, and just going, I don't understand how this is like of God. Like, God's supposed to be loving and accepting, and like Jesus loved everyone, right? He hung out with the sinners. Like, why are we focusing on this? But then I'm like, hey, I have to do this. Like, I committed to this calling. I said yes. She's the leader. The stake presidency has signed the letter, so I need to go do my duty and present it. So I went to my first ward, which happened to be in the stake house, which is where the stake presidency offices are. And I read the letter in my first ward, just like shaking. Like, I felt like I was going to throw up, because I knew it was wrong.
In sacrament meeting?
No, in Relief Society meeting.
Relief Society
meeting. In Relief Society meeting, yeah. So I'm reading it, and I just feel wrong. Like, my inside, my soul, my insides are just screaming. Like, this is like they do when I go to when I went to the temple. Your insides are just this conflict, of like, I got to do the right thing, but this is not right, So I read the letter, and then women were asking questions, and I remember one woman raised her hand, and she's like, so you're telling me I can't wear capris to the Wednesday activity? And I'm like, yes, this is, and I'm feeling like the biggest fool.
The policy, yeah.
Like, what is this, And so after, and then I sat through the meeting, and through the rest of the meeting, it was like 45 minutes. I felt like I was going to puke. And I decided, I was right there in the stake building, and I'm like, I can't do this. Cannot do this. So I had my big box of Kinko's letters, and I went down to the stake presidency offices, and one of the counselors happened to be there. And I'm like, hey, can I speak to you for a minute? And he's like, sure, come on in. We went into an office, and I set down my box of letters, and I said, look, this policy, I don't agree with it. I said, I can't do this. I can't present this anymore, and I'm just going to give you these letters and do with it what you want, but I can't do it. And he said, I'm sorry, like, what are you talking about? And I said, the modesty policy, like the dress code policy, we're presenting this in the Relief Societies. And he's like, well, I'm not familiar with that. And I'm like, well, your signature's on the paper. And so I pulled out the paper and handed it to him, and he reads it, and he goes, oh, I wasn't aware of this.
She forged his signature somehow.
Yeah.
Or got permission to put the presidency signatures.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
Dang.
he's like, oh, well, I actually wasn't aware of this. So thanks for bringing it down. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. And I'm like, what is going
Yeah,
on?
I bet.
So it turns out she had their signatures on other things from the stake, and she had just cut and pasted them onto the letter. She had the letterhead. And
Saving them time.
Yes. Yes. And, I don't know if she had spoken with them about it and thought she'd gotten their consent, or I don't know.
But then wouldn't he have known at least about it?
Right.
Maybe not
mean-
the signature, but he would have known
That it was happening.
the content of the letter.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, it's more likely that he approved it in some way than that she just totally forged his signature.
Yeah.
But either
Who
is
knows?
possible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, who
Maybe they had
knows at this
discussed
point?
it in passing at a meeting, or maybe it had been an agenda item.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And then by you saying you didn't like it, it made him feel like I got to backtrack
Could be. Yeah.
because this is dumb. But
Yeah.
I was just supporting my leader,
Who knows?
trying to
yeah.
support my leader. Yeah.
So then it turns out, so then at that point between the presidency and the two counselors, we visited like 5 wards. So then they had to do a retract, which the church is really great at, like with the 2015 policy, side note. They had the bishops go to all the relief societies where this had been presented and retract it.
Oh.
To go because it had been done in my ward. And so one week I'm sitting in my ward and the bishop comes and says, now a few weeks ago, a member of the Stake Relief Society presidency came and presented this policy and read this letter. And we're just letting you know that was just, there was maybe some miscommunication there. We don't really have that policy. We welcome everyone. We want you to come as you are.
That does
And
signify a little bit of like someone went rogue.
Yeah.
A bit.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So then I'm like, well, this is all very interesting.
Wow.
So then, but the most interesting thing is 2 weeks later, I got called in by the stake president,
Oh.
and I got released from the stake presidency.
Whoa.
I was the only one.
you were
So
the
it's
only
premature
one.
release. Yeah, I'd only been in there a year and a half. The other counselor and the secretary stayed in, and the president stayed in as well for the next 3 years.
That is fascinating.
Yeah. So that experience combined with my other issues
And did the president ever like call you out or
no.
say this hurt my feelings or like
never even spoke to me again,
ever?
ever.
Like to this day, you haven't spoken with her. Wow.
No.
That experience.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt what that did to you, but I just
Oh,
wanted
no.
to be clear.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awful.
So it's kind of that passive aggressive thing where in Mormonism you want to avoid conflict because
Yes.
we're taught contention is of the devil.
Uh-huh.
That's somewhere in the scriptures. And so that's interpreted as no, don't be direct.
Yeah.
If you're
No,
hurt
no.
or direct, don't be direct. So we gotta cut her knees from under her inside conversations.
Yeah.
And she's just been released.
Well, let's just pretend like this never happened.
Yeah.
Everyone go on nothing's happening over here. Go on your merry way, and we'll just pretend like this little blip never happened.
But because Mormons believe that God is making the callings and making the releasing from callings,
Yes, exactly.
right?
So then at this point, I'm first of all already irritated with all these things that have been bothering me
Yeah, I
in
bet.
regard to patriarchy, in regard to modesty, in regard to controlling women, right? Controlling grown ass women.
Yes.
All of these things are really starting to bug me.
Yeah.
And then this happens, and then I'm starting to question God. Because all this time I believed that God's in control, right? The church is led by God. The priesthood leaders, the prophet talks to God. The priesthood leaders work under the direction of God. And so this whole time, I had been trying to find my meaning in this calling. Like, God wants me here for some reason, right? He wants me here to be this other voice, to represent other women. And then when I was essentially like fired.
Yeah. When you were using your voice, when you were actually acting in alignment with that,
Right.
you essentially got fired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then I'm questioning, this whole thing is just maybe made up. Like maybe God has absolutely no say in any of this. Yeah.
Can I ask during this time how your stress levels, like how it impacted you to go through this.
Yes, good thing to bring that up because very high. It was around this time, around the Stake Relief Society presidency time, when I had my first panic attack. And at the time, I had no idea. Like mental health was not talked about in our family at all, even though it's a huge problem. Now I know. But it was not discussed at all. And in the context of the church at that time, mental health was very much, God can fix everything. Like counseling or therapy wasn't a thing, and I think kind of discouraged.
Right.
Because then you're leaning on the arm of flesh rather than relying on God. And so when I started having panic attacks, horrible panic attacks, I had no idea what they were. So I thought it was a medical, I thought I had a heart issue or something like that. And so for the next 5 or 6 years, I went to, I don't know how many doctors or specialists because I thought I had a physical problem, physical health problem. I did not understand or know what generalized anxiety disorder was or what panic disorder was. And that's when it all started, and it got very bad. Yeah.
It's like 5 years of undiagnosed panic disorder.
Yes.
Triggered by this experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And very expensive medical bills wasted trying to figure out what was wrong.
And our bodies aren't made to have this cortisol and this adrenaline constantly flowing through our veins. If you don't strike at the core problem and fix it through mental health services, then all these autoimmune disorders and fatigue and Epstein-Barr and all those things
snowball effect
can emerge because your body's just not made to have continual panic attacks.
like
Yeah.
nervous
or stress
system
or anxiety
activation.
all the time,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Because you're constantly living in that fight or flight space. Yeah.
It'd be like having to be handcuffed to your abuser for 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without resolving the abuse, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so during this time, I'm still attending the temple every month.
Right.
I'm still exposing myself to these things that are continuously damaging me over and over and over again.
That's so heartbreaking.
Yeah. So during this time when I'm starting to have these, mental health issues, we're still active in the church. We're still going to the church. We're still, I got put back in as a Relief Society teacher. We're still believing, but I'm starting to have tons of questions, questioning everything. I'm questioning Joseph Smith. I'm questioning God, just the very nature of God. And I was actually reading in my journal in preparation for this, and I'm the kind of 10 years, there were about 9 years between when I got released from the Stake Relief Society presidency and when I actually went to the Psychiatric Institute hospital. But over this time, I'm having this undiagnosed panic disorder, generalized anxiety, having constant panic attacks. Okay, so it's affecting my health. And at the same time, I'm struggling, I'm grappling with God, who is God? I don't understand the nature of God. And so I'm poring over the scriptures, trying to figure out a version of God or a story of God that I can be comfortable with. And at the same time, I'm starting to read feminist literature. So I discover someone named Nicholas Kristof. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was a
Sky?
Yes, Half the Sky. Yes. So I think he was a columnist for the New York Times.
Yep.
But he wrote this book called Half the Sky. And it's basically about kind of the plight of women internationally. And I watched the documentary on PBS and I read the book and I'm how can there be a God? So basically, God created women to suffer. And, going to the temple, they do the creation story. And it talks about women and their role. I mean, first of all, Eve does not speak, right?
Well, women are created from the rib.
silent. Yeah.
Eve was created from the rib of Adam.
Exactly.
from his side.
Yeah, exactly. To be his helpmeet,
Yeah.
And then she's clearly not supposed to talk because Eve does not talk, right? She just stands there and looks beautiful and dumb,
While God talks to Adam.
Yeah. And then Adam could talk to Eve, But, and then also, I can't remember where I was going with this, but, essentially also in the temple, it talks about how, and if you read in Genesis and the Pearl of Great Price, it talks about how one of the punishments of Eve is to have suffering in delivery or childbearing, right? And so I started thinking about, and then like reading Half the Sky and reading the plight of women internationally. And when you even learn about simple things like the impact that menstruation has on women culturally in other countries,
Right.
It gives women the inability to go out and get educated, to go to school, to be able to be independent from men. So automatically, just menstruation puts women in this subservient position. And I'm like, well, who created that? God did. So God hates women. So for a long time, I'm just like, God hates women, clearly.
Yeah, it's. If y'all forgive me, just indulge me for a second. There's this early YouTube channel when YouTube was first coming out called Mr. Deity, and there's an actor that plays God, and then there's an actor that plays like his secretary, and the setting is he's up in heaven, and God's trying to plan human existence, and God's trying to figure out what terrible things he's going to allow and not allow, and so God's like dictating, and his secretary's like taking notes, and it's like, well, will we have like conjoined twins? And God's like, yeah, let's have conjoined twins. Well, will we have like famines? Yeah, let's do the famines.
Why not?
Let's throw them in.
Yeah.
If you believe in an all-powerful and all-loving God, then he's got choices.
Right.
And so why would he not only make childbirth deadly for women,
Absolutely.
but frame it as a punishment for Eve, whatever Eve did.
What she was supposed to do.
And then women are all going to like risk their lives every time they have a baby because God's like, well, that's what you get because Eve did that thing that one time.
Yeah.
Like it, or like menstruation. God could have like said, yeah, no, we won't do the bleeding.
There's got to be another way.
But that's what God did.
Yeah.
It's one really interesting example of like
Yeah.
the problem of suffering,
Yes.
and the
Yes.
problem of evil, right?
Exactly.
In the world, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. And when you start to think about God that way, you're like, he's a pretty bad person, you know? So those are the questions I was starting to ask. And I was like, all the things you mentioned. Okay, if you learn that God is all powerful and all loving. And I'm like, well, that's not possible. That's not possible. Because if he's all powerful, he certainly is not all loving, because there's a lot of stuff he could be stopping or changing. And if he's all loving, there's no way he's all powerful, because he would stop those things. So I'm like, this just cannot be, So at this point, I kind of am even going past Mormonism. I maybe even have like stopped believing in Mormonism and now even like going on to God, right?
Go straight to God.
Yeah.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I was also really questioning a lot about Mormonism as well. So, and at this time, I'm having tons of questions, tons of anxiety and all this. And my husband is still fully believing 100%, right? But we've always been super honest in our marriage. So I'm asking him all of these questions. And I remember one specific night we were on a walk. And at this point I was thinking about like Mormonism and the temple and eternal marriage, because that's why, people cling to the church, I think, is because they want that eternal family, right? They want to see their family after they die. They want the eternal marriage. And so that's something that he really clung to. But I remember walking with him and saying, okay, like your grandma, who is not a member, his dad's a convert. So his grandma's not a member of the church. And my husband tried to convert her multiple times, like has sent her Book of Mormons, has, given her literature, like told her about the church. She's attended church, but never chose to join. And so his grandpa died a few years previous. And I said, so your grandma, who you love more than anyone in the world, his grandma's his hero. And I said, so you're telling me, according to the doctrine that you believe of the church, your grandma is not only not going to go to heaven, you're never going to see her again. She's never going to see her husband again. And she's probably going to go to the lowest level because she has been presented the gospel and offered the gospel and she denied it. Which, like, everyone gets a chance to hear the gospel, right? But if they deny it, that's it. You had a chance to hear it and you denied it. So I said, according to you, what you believe with the doctrine of the church, your grandma, who is the best person you know, the person you love more than anyone, other than me and your kids, she's going to be punished. She's never going to see you again or her husband again because she turned down the gospel. That's the doctrine you believe in. And he's like, well, I mean, God will work it out. Like, those things will all be worked out. And I'm like, well, if God's going to work it out then, why doesn't he work it out now? So all of these things, you can see all these questions
See, I'm
and
Mormon
things.
God and I'm Mormon prophet thinking. That's why women are veiling their faces in the temple. That's why women are hearkening to their husbands, because you, Lori, are asking way too many questions that are making me uncomfortable.
Exactly.
So
be
put you in your
invisible.
place and let's keep you a little bit on the quiet side.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
exactly.
Because those questions are making me uncomfortable.
Yeah. So if we can make you invisible, that would be the best thing here.
And mute.
So just cover yourself up.
And mute and make you busy
So
in survival
busy.
that you cannot reflect and think. That is not what we want because it's harder to control you.
Exactly. That's going to help no one here. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you about, you were saying that through all this time you're having panic attacks, that you're experiencing panic attacks. But just because my experience with panic attacks is that they're terrifying and extremely visceral, a visceral experience.
Yes.
Would you mind just sharing a little bit? So I'm interested in connecting what it was like for you to the experience of a panic attack, what it felt like for you, and how often it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so they started out, where I would only have them like once or twice a month, right?
Can I just say, I'm sorry, panic attack, you feel like you're going to die.
Yes, you do.
That's literally like
So once
the
or twice a month?
description.
Yes, that's
it's just once or twice a month it started.
only 'cause
Only
it got
once or twice a month that I want to die.
It got much worse. That's why I always say
I know.
I know. So yeah, but it's horrible. I mean, you do feel like you're going to die. So and they'll come on for no reason.
Yeah.
So a lot of times mine were nocturnal. So I would wake up in the panic, and your heart is just pressure on you. It feels like you're having a heart attack. So you have pressure on your chest. Your heart is just racing, like sweating, and then it's like existential dread. Like, you're going to die, and you just know you're going to die, and you get all numb and tingly. Like, it's very physical. It's a very physical manifestation.
Yeah.
So I went to the ER multiple times. Like,
I'm sure.
I can't tell you how much money we wasted on this.
Yeah, because you think you're having a heart attack.
Yeah. So
a couple times a month.
Oh, yeah. Like, my husband called 911 multiple times. I've ridden in the ambulance multiple times. And then after I started having them for several months, I'm like, okay, this clearly isn't a heart attack, so we're not going to call 911, but we still would drive to the ER a lot. I went to cardiologists. I had all the exams there, echocardiograms and all that stuff. My heart's perfectly fine. So this goes on for about 3 years. And it was horrible. I mean, so at this time I'm increasingly getting more depressed. It's interrupting my work life because like I'm not sleeping.
And did you have anxiety too about having one? Because
Absolutely.
then you're so afraid that you're going to just be blindsided out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. So like at work, I presented a lot and in front of groups of people, which was never a problem. But then when I started having the panic attacks, I'm like, oh, what if I have one when I'm up there, which did happen one time, which was horrific. So then you start having anxiety about the anxiety, right? And it starts disrupting your life completely. So this went on like this for like 3 years. And like I've written about it and it was a bad time. It was a bad time. And it was not a good time in my life. I don't think I was good for anyone during that time. I still had my career and everything.
Did anyone ever at the ER or at the like your cardiologist, did anyone ever bring up panic attacks or panic disorder?
That was the weirdest thing. My husband and I were just talking about this the other day. So this went on for 3 years. No one ever talked to me about anxiety, about panic disorder, about anything. Finally, I went to a nurse practitioner. So I got a new doctor, and I couldn't see the doctor, so I saw the nurse practitioner. And I remember, her name is Susan. I remember it clear as day. She does all the exam and everything with me. And she comes in and she kind of sits down in the chair next to me. And she says, what you have is generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder. She goes, this is a mental health issue. Mm-hmm. And I had never been told that. And she's like, you really need to go to therapy. And that was the first time that had been presented to me.
And how many years into your experience was that?
God, we were probably 3 years in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took a woman to figure that out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's really something.
Exactly. And I'd been to the ER. It's embarrassing to even say how many times I'd been to the ER.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so good for her. And I'm super grateful to her. Mm-hmm. So Susan Greenhalgh, I think was her name. She was fantastic. But anyways, so I actually did start to see a therapist, which was wonderful because I started to learn like what was going on inside my head. And she was so great because she wasn't Mormon. So I started saying, she's the only person besides my husband that I had shared my doubts with. My doubts about the faith and the things I was really, really struggling with, like the nature of God and what I believe and, all of this. And so I started talking to her about that, and I started telling her how painful the temple was for me. And she said, okay, well, we're going to teach you how to deal with these panic attacks, but the first thing we've got to do is we've got to start removing the things from your life that are causing them. And so she's like, okay, your job, you can't remove your job. So we're going to have to learn coping mechanisms around that. That's a source of stress. Kids, family, you can't remove those. So we're going to learn how to, deal with that. But this temple thing, you can remove. And I'm like, well, I actually can't because you kind of commit, you're supposed to go once a month. That's what you need to do to get to the celestial kingdom. That's what I was taught. You've got to go once a month. That's what my parents taught. That's what you've got to do. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, really, I can't. And she said, okay, well, what parts of it bother you the most? So I talked about the veiling of the face and the hearkening and all that. And she's like, are there other things you can do there? Can you go to the temple and do other things? And I said, yes.
Initiatories.
That's what I did. Which is not a lot better.
I mean, not when we went through.
No,
you're wearing this
that's
poncho,
when you had the open, naked
Having
underneath.
someone touch you.
People touching you.
Completely naked on the sides.
Yeah, totally open. You're like trying to hold the sides when you're walking so it doesn't open.
Yeah, it's sort of like you're just changing the problem.
Yeah, yeah. So, but at least
they
at
touch
that
on your
point,
breast. They touch you on your groin, like it's with the oil, and you're naked, and
yeah, it's weird. And they're blessing you to have multiply and replenish the earth and blah blah blah. And so, anyways, but that's what I traded it for because at that point I couldn't. It just wasn't an option in my family to not. I mean, all 6 kids endowed, all you know what I mean, like everyone perfect.
Wow.
Like it just was not an option to not do those things. Or to say no, or to not live up to your covenants. And so I'm like, okay, I won't do the endowment, but I'll still go every month and do the initiatories or the sealings. So I did that for a couple more years where I stopped going to the endowment, but I did the other things you can do in the temple. Helped a little bit, but clearly not enough. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So, but she was great. Yeah. But the panic attacks didn't really stop at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At least you're trying stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's because I still wasn't dealing with the core. I wasn't, I guess, ready to deal with the core issue yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So where did you go from there? Did you keep trying stuff?
So yeah, I did. I actually got on medication at that time, which was good, which was needed. And I would have good periods of time where, panic would kind of go away and I wouldn't have as many panic attacks and things like that. But during this time, I'm still questioning everything. So we're still going to church and like little things are bothering me, like people seeing, in the sacrament meeting, which is kind of like the general meeting for the church, people give talks, just regular lay members of the congregation get up and give talks on various subjects. And things that people would say would start bugging me. And so I would get to the point where I would stand up and leave in the middle of sacrament meeting. I would walk out. I was asking my girls, I'm like, what's some of your memories of me in the church? And my oldest daughter is like, you walking out of sacrament meeting because you were so mad. So, and it would mostly be around, there's so many little microaggressions around women in the church and the role of women. And they're just little things people say all the time. Gender roles in the church are such a big deal. Mm-hmm. Everyone's focused on what men are supposed to do, what women are supposed to do, what your divine roles are. I mean, you remember like in the Young Women's Organization, you have the, what were they called? The values?
Yes.
Divine worth and
individual nature, choice and accountability.
All these things. And so it's like very focused on what you're supposed to be doing. So a lot of times lessons are given on that or talks are given on that. And those things really started to bug me. And then at the same time, I'm becoming probably like more and more feminist and understanding like, especially when you look at the plight of women outside of even this country, which this country is now going completely backwards. But when you look like internationally, like reading this Half the Sky book, which by the way, I would totally recommend, and reading about the plight of women in other countries, it really is when you take women and between their menstrual cycle, pregnancy, childbirth, and breastfeeding, it locks them down. Like they can't, because you're just, in our country, you're like, well, just, if you're in a bad situation with a man, leave the situation, get educated, create a life for yourself. That is not an option internationally in a lot of places. Like they don't have, even in a lot of countries in Africa, they don't have like menstrual products. Like once you start menstruating, you just stop going to school because you can't take a week off every month, right? So then it makes women to where they can't be educated. They can't provide for themselves. They have to be dependent on a man. And that's whatever man they can get, right? And then once you become dependent on a man, you're going to get pregnant because there's not birth control. And then once you're pregnant, then you're stuck. Mm-hmm. That is your plight. And so then I kept going back to God really, if God is real, he hates women. Like everything he did was to punish women for something he told Eve to do. So then I'm starting to get into these secular arguments in my head. It's like, okay, well, Eve had to partake of the fruit or else the whole plan of salvation wouldn't have started. But then she was punished for partaking of the fruit, and not only her, but all of us. But then she had to take the fruit or else and then I'm like, this is ridiculous. This whole thing is ridiculous. So I'm feeling that way, but at the same time, and this is where my anxiety just went out of control, my family is super important to me. So like my parents, my siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles, etc. And everyone is very in and very active. And there is no room for questioning. Like I couldn't discuss any of this with my mom, my dad, my siblings, no one. It was just my husband. And then I'm like, okay, I don't want to, like I'm living inauthentically. And that was the core issue of my anxiety. I'm living an unauthentic life. And at some point that's going to break. You can't do that forever. And so I know I don't believe, I know I want to leave, but it was inconceivable for me that I could do that because it would break my mother. Because in the Mormon church, as you know, your goal is to get, especially as a mother, as a woman, is to get your whole family to the celestial kingdom.
It's kind of it's not only your main purpose, but it's your responsibility.
Yes.
It is absolutely like, if they don't make it, it's on you.
It's on you.
Right.
It's on you 100%. And my mom carries that. She believes that.
Yeah.
And so I knew if I left, I would be breaking that. And my parents did everything right. They followed every rule. They sacrificed everything. You know, they had all these callings. They always did the temple all the time, you know, like they did everything right. And I'm like, this is her whole life's purpose. If I leave, it's going to break it's going to ruin everything. Like,
so are you basically saying that you're feeling like it's either your authenticity or you're breaking your mom's not only heart, but like, you know, and that's kind of what and for as long as you could, it feels like you chose to not disappoint, not break your parents' heart, to stay in line with the family thing until
you break. Yeah. So I had, I kind of had this plan for a while that I was going to stay in, meaning fully active, going to church every week, etc., until my mom died, because I couldn't, I'm like, I can't do this, which was ridiculous because she was in her 60s at the time. So, but that's for a while I thought what I was going to do. But then during this time, like I talked about the panic attacks getting worse. So at this time, I'm starting to be not only have horrible anxiety, but panic attacks 3 to 4 times a week. Wow. So I am exhausted. I am trying to hold down my job, but not super successfully because I'm so tired. I'm miserable. And then it starts to manifest itself physically. As you know, it does. You know, it can be a very physical thing. And I started feeling like extremely sick. So this was in 2014. And this started around the beginning of the year. And then it progressively got worse. And so around in like May, at that point, I'm like, I can't do this anymore, but I can't break my mom, my family. My husband was fully supportive at that point of leaving because he saw the impact it was having on me. But I'm like,
his beliefs change too at the time, or do you even want to say?
They were, yes. Okay. So I was ahead of him, but I had asked questions for so long that he was starting to question everything as well.
Got it.
So he's like, we'll just, we'll figure it out. And I'm like, I can't do it. There's no way out of this.
Yeah. So you're feeling trapped.
Yeah. So in May, I was quite depressed. And we actually ended up going to, it's called UNI, but it's the University of Utah Neuropsychiatric Institute. And It's basically a mental hospital. And I just felt so hopeless and trapped that we actually went up there. But they evaluate you. And because I didn't have like a specific suicide plan, so to speak, I didn't get admitted at that time. Mm-hmm.
Usually when someone goes there, they've made an attempt.
Yes.
And then it's like, what do we do with them? The hospital, you take them to
That's
uni
right.
or something like it.
Yeah.
The fact that you did it proactively was really good. And I want to encourage that. If you ever feel, viewers, listeners, if you ever feel that trapped, that desperate, that's a good thing to just check yourself in or at least do the assessment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Before you get to the point of actually making a plan and following through with the plan.
Yeah, definitely. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So I don't know if we want to give like a trigger warning a little bit.
Let's do that.
Because I'm going to go into detail about the process that happened. So if anyone...
Self-harm and suicidality.
Yeah. So if anyone's sensitive to that, just take
away.
Care. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this was the summer of 2014. So during this time, I'm not only mentally very sick, but also physically very sick as well because I was in pain. I had stopped eating. I was getting very little sleep. So I actually had to take a leave of absence. I had to do family medical leave from work because I just couldn't even function at work anymore. And that in and of itself was horrible and like horribly embarrassing because I've always been in leadership roles. I had a team I managed, and I've always been like a student, like top of the class type thing, perfectionist a little bit. And so to just be completely falling apart and not even be able to like manage my career was awful.
It's like an identity crisis.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. And so then we go into like the month of June, and June is when I just completely fell apart. So I'm having panic attacks frequently. And because of all this, I am incredibly depressed, right? I'm not eating. I just cannot figure out in my mind at the place I was, it was so dark. I could not figure out how to get out. Like it was not an option to keep living this way. It was not an option to leave. And I couldn't see a way out. And so I remember one really horrible night. I had not slept at all. And I had gone into the office, and I had, pills that I had from medications. And I'm like, I have to be done with this. I can't live like this. I can't leave the church. I can't stay in the church. I can't, I just want to be done. It hurts so bad. I cannot describe the turmoil. Like the pain is like nothing I've never experienced anything like it since. And so I actually called the suicide hotline. Because I didn't want to die, but I just wanted the pain to stop, And I just couldn't figure out a way out. So I called them. This was like 3 a.m, and they really recommended that I go up to uni. So I woke up my husband, and I kind of explained the situation, and of course he was terrified, right? And so he drives me up there, and I was terrified too. Yeah. I mean, everything you hear about, like, all the movies about a psych ward or a mental hospital, I'm like, what's going to happen? Am I going to be like in a straitjacket? Am I going to be like tied down? Like, I had no idea what to expect, no clue. Yeah. And so he drives me up, they do the assessment, and I share like my plan and everything, and that I want to die, like I can't do it. And so they actually admitted me, which turned out to absolutely save my life. Because what it does is it provides you a pause where you don't have to worry about your responsibilities of your job, being a wife, being a mother, being a daughter, all of that. And it also provides you the help and skills you need to learn how to cope with the situation. And so I had actually a really amazing psychiatrist up there. And I requested my intake notes from the mental hospital, and it talks a lot about the church in it. And he was fantastic. And so he really just taught me how to it's impossible not to worry about things you can't control, like your mom, but really you have to live your life for yourself. And
imagine that. I
know. And that like making other people happy is not my responsibility.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was there for 9 days with really intensive therapy, individual therapy, group therapy.
Probably medication.
Yes. Yeah. And it was a wonderful experience. Like, I was so grateful. Like, I was so grateful to be there and to be getting that care. And then they bring your husband and my husband and my kids into it as well. And he helped us make a plan on what the exit from the church was going to look like, how it was going to go. And,
wow, beautiful, tangible,
yes,
practical.
Yes. And so we had a plan, and and then we followed that plan. And it, wasn't super easy. So like I got out in July, And I taught a little primary class, which a primary class is children in the church, and it was my daughter's class. And the family wasn't quite ready to leave yet, so they still attended. I started volunteering at a hospital because I wanted to do something productive with my time on Sunday. So I would volunteer at a hospital during the morning, and then I would go teach my class at the end of the meeting. And they were great kids. And I stopped teaching lessons. We just sat on the floor and ate candy and talked about their weeks for the rest of the year, which was delightful. And they were such fun kids.
We can relate, right, babe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So not church approved,
right?
Not approved.
Lessons, not the point.
Yeah, exactly. But they were great kids and I loved them. So we did that. And then at the end of the year, we told our kids who were 11 and 14 at the time, and we said, hey, look, if you guys want to keep attending, we'll be happy to support you. We'll be happy to take you. And both of my daughters were like, are you kidding me? We don't want to attend. They had no interest whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So then we just stopped attending. So yeah, that's I talked a lot right there.
No, you talked perfectly. And I mean, honestly, a way to distill what you just said is the illness was traditional Orthodox Mormonism, and the cure to your mental illness was leaving Orthodox Mormonism or Mormonism altogether. I don't mean to be crass, but that
100%. And not to say that I didn't learn things, because then I, of course, continued therapy, which was hugely helpful to learn how the brain works and how neural pathways had been built that when I was triggered, my brain just automatically went to that place. So I learned about that. I learned about mindfulness, being in the moment, meditation, experiencing joy.
Yes.
So I learned a lot of things from the experience too. But as soon as I decided to leave and live my life authentically, and this is the hope I want to provide to people, and not to say it's not easy. Bad things have still happened in my life. But after I got out of the hospital, I had a few panic attacks here and there through 2014. I have not had a panic attack since 2014. Not one. Knock on wood. But the peace, I cannot tell you. You know how when you're in the church, and any Mormon will relate to this, you're told that the highest peace you can feel is in the temple.
Right.
You go to the temple, and it's such a place.
It's heaven on earth.
It's the closest thing to heaven you'll get.
The pinnacle.
And it is where you will feel true peace. I'll tell you where I felt true peace. The first time I truly experienced savasana with yoga, I'm like, oh, this is the peace they speak of. This is the peace they speak of. It's inside of you. It's inside of you,
Yeah.
It's not in the church. It's not in this God. It's not in this religion. It's not in the temple. It's something you build in yourself.
Yeah.
But being self-sufficient within yourself emotionally is contrary to Mormonism. Because Mormonism says you need this one true religion to be saved, to go to heaven, to find happiness.
Yeah.
This is true and everlasting happiness. It's not taught to find it within yourself. And being taught that and taking my own power back has been the gift. I think you've talked about the gift of the faith crisis. The gift.
Yeah.
It's yourself.
Yes.
It's your own life.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the gift.
Yeah.
Because that kind of got taken from you. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been pretty amazing. Yeah.
Man, I've got a couple things and then a question. So Maven is so good. She's been helping produce this episode. She wanted to remind everyone that in the United States, there's a new number to call if you're experiencing suicidality. She says the number is 988 instead of 911.
Oh, great.
And that's sort of like a 911 call for suicidal ideation.
Wow. Thank you, Maven.
So Maven wanted me to mention that.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
I also just want to note that in Utah, they've done studies comparing like all 50 states with women's mental health. And my understanding is Utah ranks at the bottom in the United States for women's mental health.
That's what I've heard too.
And whether, like at the bottom, now, I could be wrong, but like that's my understanding. And so, and I kind of pay attention to these things. So, you know, and whether or not women lose their faith or feel that they're even allowed to question their faith, I know there's just a mountain of Mormon women who are trapped in high levels of anxiety and or depression. And by the way, untreated anxiety leads to depression, not as a replacement, but depression on top of the anxiety.
Yes.
And that's what happens when you don't treat your anxiety.
Yes.
And so, you know, and when you were saying with Half the Sky that like, oh man, you know, women in developing countries have it really bad because they, you know, they deal with menstruation different and they're trapped because they have babies and are married. And it's no different it's different, but it's still significantly severe.
Yeah.
That once you get married when you're 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 and then immediately start having quick kids, which is what the church wants.
Yes.
By design, the church wants Mormon women married early and having kids as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
And having as many kids as quickly as possible. And like education and career are literally like not important.
No.
Compared to any of that.
Discouraged.
And right. And that leaves Mormon women almost, I would venture to say almost as trapped as the women in these developing countries.
Exactly.
Because once you've got 4 kids.
What are you going to do? You have no education. You don't have a career. If you're in a bad situation, you have 4 kids, you don't have options. Like you really don't.
And you certainly don't feel like you have options.
No.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Go back to school?
With 4 kids.
You get divorced and then who's going to watch your kids and how are you going to afford it?
Right.
Now you're splitting household income. You know, like, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's and this isn't just like, oh, the sky's falling. This is so many Mormon women.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a real issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, to your point, you don't even see that you have options, even if you do, because your whole life has been defined and mapped out before you're born. Think of a baby blessing. So for people who aren't never Mormons, this is like a christening for the baby. But in this case, a baby is like blessed by their father who holds the priesthood, and they kind of give a blessing and they talk about what they want for the life of this child. You listen to any traditional Mormon baby blessing for a girl. What is it going to say? I bless you that you'll grow up, you'll be kind to your brothers and sisters, you'll respect your mother, that you'll find a worthy mate to marry in the temple, that you'll become a mother. I mean, your life is mapped out for you before you're 2 months old. Like you already know what your life is supposed to look like. And there's no deviance from that.
And the patriarchal blessings, as Julie is noting, the patriarchal blessings do the same thing. It's kind of like Mormon fortune telling, but like some old man who's always a man, when you're like 16 or 17, lays his hands on your head. It's supposedly God talking. They write out the prayer. And what does your patriarchal blessing say? You know what I mean?
That I'm going to get married and then I'm going to have kids and I'm going to teach my children, you know. And in fact,
Wait, your patriarchal blessing didn't say you'd have a fantastic career?
No mention of career. None whatsoever.
Weird.
Although my husband's did.
Oh, weird. And he stayed home with the kids.
Yeah.
Like, right?
I know, we broke the
It's
rules.
conditioning.
Completely. Yeah, you're just told over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I have to share something really funny. So in the temple, when you get married and you get sealed, there, of course, is nothing about vows to each other or covenants to each other. It's all just this priesthood person telling you all these things. And one of the things he says is, you know, that you'll be blessed, that you'll multiply and replenish the earth as, you know, part of this union and stuff. And I remember I was never super keen on motherhood. And my kids know this. And so I remember going to my dad, who I saw as my like church authority, and saying, like, I know I covenanted to multiply and replenish the earth, but like technically, how many kids do I have to have? And I'm like, in my head, I say 2 because technically that's multiplying, and then replenishing, that's like replacing me and my husband. So is that okay? And he's like, well, technically, yeah, that's probably okay. And I'm like,
I think you're replenishing, not multiplying. I'm sorry.
I was like, okay, I think that's what I'm like, okay, well, that's all we're going to do then.
We're replenishing.
And that's what we did.
But isn't that also how, I mean, it just shows our conditioning too, because you're going to a man to ask about your life, your body, what you're going to be asking of yourself.
Yes.
And then,
Yeah, I'm asking a man for direction. And then what do I have to do to meet this requirement?
yes, you tell me.
Yeah, you tell me what I need to do to meet this requirement.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, one of the most important shifts for me about what you described too during your time in uni is that on some level, I think in families that maybe aren't conditioned families, don't come from high demand religions, right? There might be a place for individuation, differentiation, growing into adulthood, and moving on from this family system that's enmeshed and highly a controlled scenario, really just a mini world of your church world, right? But in Mormonism, it isn't like that. So it's all the whole creation very much is to keep you part of the system, to keep you young, to keep you subservient still. The parents are still the parents, even though you're 42 and you may have kids or, right?
Oh, absolutely.
That's the experience. And what I see really shifted for you, particularly as a woman in the church, is moving from I exist for others. I exist to make you more comfortable, to make you happier, to relieve your suffering, to show up in a way that's easiest for you, right?
Yes.
To be other-centered, which is very much about, like, that is our role.
Right.
Like, a lot of what it means to be a woman in the church is about our significance to others. And then, but that flip was, I am significant to myself.
Yeah. Which is a complete paradigm shift, right? And at the beginning, it feels very selfish. You feel like a very selfish person when your sole purpose is not for others.
Yeah.
To live for yourself at the beginning feels very selfish.
Which has been part of the conditioning too.
Yes.
Like that is part of the, like, what we've been conditioned to think.
Right. Exactly. So moving away from that is a journey. You know, and it takes time to get there.
Yeah.
But it can happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a rebuilding of its own. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one question, and I've got a few. One question I had is, what is Shavasana? Really quickly.
Oh, yeah. So yoga. So that's one thing that I started
Margie's
practicing.
mugging at me.
I'm smiling at you.
She knows what Shavasana is. So one thing that I did start practicing that I started practicing at uni. So they have, you're there 24 hours a day. So they've got to have activities and things to fill up the day when you're not in therapy. So they had yoga, which I had started doing a little bit before I went there. But, kind of in my... maybe this was just my family, but it was kind of naughty because it was kind of Buddhist stuff, right? So you're going away from religion, which is supposed to, Mormonism solves all your problems. You don't need any other methods, any other ways. And so it was kind of this departure, a little bit naughty to do yoga, right? So anyways, but I started practicing it. And so, which, first of all, is amazing because you learn mindfulness and you learn all these things. The Mormon church keeps you so busy. You don't know what mindfulness is. But I started practicing yoga. And then at the end of a yoga practice, they have what's called Shavasana. And basically, it's where you just lie still. You kind of go inward. You lie still for like 3 to 4 minutes, completely still. And then you kind of rebirth and come out from that. And then you end your practice. But yeah, during that is when I finally, like, you pause and you just live in the moment. And that was one of the first times I felt like true peace in my life. And it was really awesome. And I still practice it. I still love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. We want to get to kind of your healing and regrowth, but I just have one quick Mormon-related question before we depart. Did you happen to see a month or two ago the Relief Society General Presidency statement that Mormon women are more, whatever it was, are more empowered than other women in the world and other faiths, that we give women more broad power than anyone else, sort of thing. Did you see that?
I didn't see it, but I heard the clip, yes.
Okay. Did you have her? Because, I mean, that's what part of what prompted this idea of a women's panel and focusing on Relief Society presidents and presidencies.
Yeah.
Which brought us you.
Yeah. So thank you, Mormon Church, for bringing us Lori Young. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, first of all, things don't really anger me anymore because I don't really care about the church anymore, right? But I think to me, it's just almost humorous because one of the biggest, and this is the thing that's fascinating about, I would say cults, I kind of consider the church a cult, but is that they actually use their own people. They do the policing, right? And in the Mormon church, it's actually the women, like the Stake Relief Society president, who did the policing, right? And so because of that, the women try to make themselves feel better by saying things like that, right? So I think they spread this misinformation and they spread this false information as a way to build themselves up and make themselves feel better.
Right.
Like that woman, I can't remember her name, but she knows full well she can make no decision without the priesthood, without the men. She knows that. Like, she's not stupid. And so to say that they have more power is ridiculous. And she knows that. They have more power under the direction of men. But we always say these things to placate ourselves, you know? Like oftentimes if I'll make a comment about how women are not equal in the church, you know, you get a lot of women responding and saying, well, I've always felt equal. I've never experienced that. I've never experienced that feeling. Well, you tell yourself a lot of things to make yourself feel better in the church. And I think that's just another attempt to placate themselves and to also try to put on this appearance that because the church is bleeding and we all know they're bleeding members. And I think they keep trying to put on this public appearance of, no, look, we are progressive. We do give women power. We do all these things. And they want to put that image out to the world. Yeah.
They're not just bleeding members, they're bleeding women.
Yes.
And sorry, one last thing. They regularly will do studies and ask Mormon women whether they want the priesthood. And they'll ask men, too, whether women should get the priesthood. Weirdly, in Mormonism, or maybe predictably, more Mormon men, a higher percentage of Mormon men think Mormon women should receive the priesthood than Mormon women think that they should receive the priesthood. I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. Do you have any guess as to why that's, you know, like it goes back to your point about women, Mormon women saying, we're fine. I feel great. I feel totally empowered. Any other thoughts on why that might be?
I think it's because it's that conditioning. I think Mormon women are so conditioned that a lot of them do believe that's their purpose or that's their plight. I think they are so conditioned that way. And I think they're also, a lot of Mormon women are afraid of power. I think they are afraid of taking their own power back. I think they are afraid. They've been taught for so long to be small, to be invisible, to be silent, that I think they would almost be uncomfortable with it because they're so conditioned not to be that way. But I think what people misunderstand about the priesthood is, which I totally think is not real anymore, but it's not about, you know, when the whole Kate Kelly thing was happening, the ordained women, people were always like, well, I don't want the priesthood anyways. Why would I want to be a bishop? That sounds hard, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you're missing the whole point. It's not about having the priesthood. It's the fact that the people with the priesthood are in authority over you. And there should be no authority between men and women. It should be equal. And that's the whole point that's missed. But I think women say that because I think a lot of them are afraid, first of all, and a lot of them are just so conditioned to be in their role. A lot of times they participate in their own oppression. A lot in the church, very much so. Yeah.
I guess there's internalized sexism as a thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. Well, you talked about how important mental health was in helping you. It's one thing to lose your faith in Mormonism and or to leave the church, but it's not like that then makes you happy. Like you still have to figure out how to be healthy and happy.
That's right.
You talked about the wiring in the brain and therapy and yoga. Are there any aspects you want to share with Mormon women? Or I think the reason why 70% of our audience has never been Mormon is we have ex-evangelical Christians, ex-Catholics, ex-Protestants, ex-Jews, ex-Muslims.
Yeah.
Some people don't like the term ex-Jew. So I didn't mean offense by that, because sometimes people view Judaism as a culture, not a faith. Mm-hmm. So sorry for that faux pas. Or, ex-high demand religions.
Yeah.
So for those women or men, I'm sure can benefit as well from what were some key points of healing, growth, self-development for you apart from therapy and yoga?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that I really struggled with, and I think a lot of women who have been in high demand religions will struggle with this, and that's trying to figure out what your purpose is after you leave. Because of that conditioning you talked about, Margie, where, your purpose is really to make other people comfortable or to help other people or serve other people. It's always for someone else. And so one thing I really struggled with after is like, well, what's the point of my life now, right? Like now that I've left this belief set and this culture, now I don't know what my purpose is, right? And so part of that through therapy and also just spending time with myself was trying to figure out, well, what is my purpose? Like, why am I here? What should I be doing with my life now? Because you get a lot of free time back after leaving a high demand religion. You get a lot of free time, which is lovely. So I really, I would recommend therapy, of course, and then really internally going inward and thinking about what you want your purpose to be. Because you've likely, if you're a woman in a high demand religion, you've lived your whole life around being a good daughter, being a good spouse, being a good mother, and that's really been your role. And you haven't really thought about, what does my life look like? What is my purpose for me, right? And so I really came down to two things. I'm like, my purpose is to ease human suffering and experience joy. And that's it. And that's it. And when you're in a high demand religion, it's so complicated what your purpose is and all the things you have to do. You have to pay tithing. You have to go to church. You have to say yes to callings. You have to pray. You have to go to the temple. There's all these things you have to do that really serve no purpose. And so really identifying what your purpose is, what you want your life to look like. And so I try to things that I do that I invest my time with, I weigh against those two purposes. Does this ease human suffering, make someone's life better, or do I experience joy from this, right? So that was really helpful. And then the other thing I would say is seek out new connections. So one thing, at least for me, when I left Mormonism, you think you have all these friends or connections within the church, but church friends are not friends. They are church friends. You think you're friends with them because you see them every Sunday and you talk to them every Sunday and they know your kids. And then you see them at the midweek activity, or maybe you are their visiting teacher, or I think they call it ministering sister now or something. So you think they're your friends, but they're actually not, because they all go away when you leave the church. That was the only thing you had in common. So I would say seek out those groups. For me, it was hugely important 10 years ago, listening to Mormon stories, hearing other people's stories was super important. And then I don't know if you remember, John, and I don't even know if this is still around, but 10 years ago, there was a group called, I think, Mormon Spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you could go online and see where little groups had been created.
Yeah.
And so we went onto that website and we saw that there was one little group in Daybreak, Utah, a tiny little group. And they met at the park every Sunday. And so one Sunday we went, I think there was 40 total members in that group. So we went there and we just met the most beautiful people. like wonderful people. There are so many incredible people that have left Mormonism. And I'm sure it's the case with any high demand religion. But then, we started doing activities with them and meeting them. And by the way, that group now has over 1,000 members. Started with 40.
What's it called?
It was a South Valley Mormons in Transition.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. So if anyone is going
started at 40,
we have
but now
40.
you're saying
I think there's over
1,000.
1,000.
I remember when that was created. Yeah. Mormon
Valley.
Spectrum came out when I got excommunicated in 2015. I had a retreat in, I think it was Park City or maybe even Hebrew Midway. And this group called Waka sort of had its genesis after that retreat. I'm not taking any credit for Waka, but Mormon Spectrum was another one. It's like, let's have a directory of all the internet communities for people. And I just checked, mormonspectrum.org is still up there. There's still a map. I don't know if it's maintained, but it's still got a lot of links that I'm sure are valid.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Just maybe not newer ones. But then Thrive, we tried to replicate that at Thrive. So thrivebeyondreligion.com. There's a map as well. But, the way Thrive's set up is you can start your own community if there isn't one. But you can just go to Facebook and Google like Mormons in Montana, and you'll find some of the Mormon Spectrum or, whatever Thrive groups there. And you could do Mormons in Houston. But and there's also Waka Worldwide, which is a fantastic support group for women over 40 who have no longer believe in the church. There's Faith Journey Meetups, which is an amazing group for kind of women under 40, predominantly along the Wasatch Front.
Okay.
And there's the ex-Mormon Reddit. There's so many fantastic communities now, and it's essential. Margie and I were reading some research that showed that there's evidence to suggest that finding the right friends and like social group can be as important, or in some cases even more important than like things like diet and exercise. And that's not to say you shouldn't eat well and exercise. It's just to say a healthy friends and social life cannot be easily undervalued.
Yeah. And I would absolutely agree. And that's one thing I would recommend for anyone, like seek that out, because not only can you find people who have kind of this shared experience, and sometimes you need that to process that and move past it. And, obviously we've moved now, we're not in contact with them anymore. But at the time, that was so important to have that. And then the other thing that I just cannot say enough about is like learning to laugh, in the Temple You Covenant, not to have any loud laughter, and introducing humor into it and laughing about it. Oh, I just cannot even tell you how good that is for the soul. So seeking out those groups, I think, is really important. Therapy, finding some practice for yourself, whether it's yoga, whether it's, meditation or whatever it is. But because when you leave a high demand religion, you are going to have to kind of like rebuild your identity and learn who you are. Like, what does bring you joy? What things do you enjoy? And so you'll have to kind of rebuild your own identity. So carving out time for that in some practice or some way, I think is crucial to do that self-discovery, because you've never really done that. You've not been taught to do that. You've been told what your life is going to look like. So you really have to kind of take a pause and decide what you want it to look like. Yeah.
What are some of the practices that you have had? What does that look like for you?
Like yoga or like meditation practices?
Your time for you, your time to connect to yourself.
Glory time.
Yeah, definitely. Meditation is key, which I've never, you're so busy in Mormonism. You don't, you think you sit still, but you really don't.
That's right.
So like actually sitting still and doing meditations, whether it's self-affirmations or whether it's peace or stillness or whatever it is really important. I think for me, a key component that was really important for me, because I was very service-oriented in the church, I didn't want to lose that when I left. And so becoming involved in volunteering in various capacities was hugely important for me. The cool thing is you get to decide what you want to do. So volunteering is no longer signing up to bring a casserole to a funeral or signing up to clean the church for the 10 millionth time or doing, the volunteer activities that are provided within the church because that keeps you so busy, but actually looking outside in your community and determining what am I passionate about? Where do I want to spend my free time or my volunteering time? And being able to pick that is so cool, right? Because then you decide what you care about. And you can still be a selfless, giving, good person, but you can do it your own way.
Right.
And so trying out a few different places and, really deciding what causes you're passionate about and deciding that for yourself is really awesome.
I can imagine. What are some of the places that you have chosen that have really been a good fit for you?
So right after I left, I volunteered at the hospital at St. Mark's. And that was pretty good, but it didn't have enough interpersonal. I really like interpersonal connections. And so we found this organization called the Legacy Initiative in Salt Lake City. I don't know if they still run or not. But once a month they would get together and make about 1,000 burritos. And then we would have backpacks. We would roll them in foil. We would have backpacks with the burritos, water, socks, and everything. And we took our kids down there once a month, and you just go around, like the Rio Grande area to the homeless encampments, and you give them what they need as far as like socks, essentials like that, water, the burritos, and then we would just talk to them.
Yeah.
And I had never done that before. But one thing I really realized when I was in uni is I felt so lucky to be there that I had not only the financial capability to be there because I had good insurance and I had a supportive husband. I felt like I was that close away from being one of those people who was homeless.
Absolutely. That's right.
Because if you have a mental illness that goes untreated because you don't have the financial support you need, or you don't have the family support.
Yes.
That's what a lot of them have, right? Untreated mental illness. And so talking to them, I thought, anyone could be here.
Yeah.
You think you can't, but anyone could be there with just a little bit of a difference in your situation.
Absolutely.
And so that was a really good situation. It was great for our girls, to know that as well, to actually talk to people. They're human beings. They're not just people you drive by that are intense on the side of the road.
Yeah.
They're humans.
Yeah.
What was the name of that nonprofit again?
Legacy Initiative.
Okay.
Yeah.
So check that out. Julie will see if there's a link. I also want to make a shout out to another organization that sounds very similar. It's called the Food Justice Coalition. So you can go to foodjusticecoalition.org. The person who runs it, her name is Jeanette Padilla Vega. And I have a friend that's connected to this group, and that it sounds very similar. They just literally just put packages of food together and then distribute them to houseless people. So check out foodjusticecoalition.org in
That's
addition
great.
to
Legacy Initiative.
Yeah, okay.
If it's still running. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
But that's awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was one. We got involved with another one called Family Promise. Family Promise is an organization. It's actually a national organization. But this was very eye-opening because what it is they provide transitional housing to homeless families or individuals. And the housing is either in churches, and they stay for a week at a time, and then they move to another church, or some churches actually own homes where they'll have like one family on one floor and then one family on another floor. The thing that was so very eye-opening about this for us is that the Mormon Church was not involved. All these other churches in the Salt Lake Valley, the Mormon Church would be, I think in one capacity they were involved providing food, but they would not allow the people to stay in the church buildings.
Right.
Where we would go to these other, because a lot of times we would clean in preparation for them coming. So we would go to some other church, Presbyterian or Lutheran church, and we would go and clean out their classrooms, essentially, put out blow-up beds, wash sheets, things like that. The Mormon Church would not allow people to stay in the church.
Yeah.
And that for me was super eye-opening because I was like, wow, the Mormon Church owns more buildings in this valley. They have tons of space. They are not used all the time. Why on earth would they not be a part of this?
Yeah.
Where you've got these other little churches who are struggling, don't have a lot of space, have 1 or 2 buildings in the whole valley
Right.
opening up their doors.
Yeah.
And that was like, wow,
Yeah.
very eye-opening, you know? So we did that for a little while too. And then I have done women's shelters quite a bit. I'm very passionate about that, obviously. Helping women be free of domestic violence, make a life on their own.
Yeah.
That's down in California. It's called Wise Place. If anyone is in that area, it's an incredible women's shelter. And then transitional, they get them into transitional apartments and back on their feet. Most of them are leaving domestic violence situations. So that's been a lot of fun too.
I know Cache Valley has CAPSA, which is something that we felt very strongly about in terms of support to women's
When we
shelter
were
in
there.
Cache Valley. That's I'm sure there's lots throughout Utah.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Women's shelter. What a great replacement for Mormonism.
Yes.
Supporting a women's shelter or a feeding the houseless. Like,
Exactly.
what a trade up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the coolest thing is deciding where, all that money we paid to tithing, which I would love to get back, but being able to decide where you donate your money.
Yes. Right where it
Donating
goes.
what you're passionate about instead of to the, $110 billion fund up there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Taking your own power back. What do you care about? What are you passionate about?
Yeah.
Where do you want to put your time? Where do you want to put your money?
Yeah.
You have to redefine all that for yourself,
Yeah.
I have a question kind of around rebuilding. I think oftentimes based on where we've been and maybe how we've been conditioned, I think we can think about rebuilding or even healing, I feel like is this way, where it's like, get her done. Like, let's hurry and we're going to just rebuild it and whoop, okay, I'm done. Yep, healed. Nice job.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas I think it's this ongoing, and that's the beauty of it, right? Is that it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
But, what aspects of rebuilding, like what have the challenges been? If there have been particular challenges, and also, really the joys of it.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, it's not a linear process. There's lots of ups and downs too, So one thing for me, and I'm sure a lot of Mormons with kids who leave the church, you worry like, are my kids going to turn out okay now?
Yeah.
Because you're so conditioned that your kids need the church. They need that structure to be good kids. And without it, they're going to get in trouble, right? So one challenge for me is like, if my kids ever have a tough time or they're going through a tough patch, I'll revert back to that and go, this wouldn't have happened if we didn't leave. This is because we left the church. This is because we left the church. And you still have those doubts that creep up, or those times where like, you did the right thing, but then you go back to that questioning, like, is God punishing us now because we left the church, so we're having a rough time? Or, about 4 years after we left, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so sometimes you go back in and you're like, oh my gosh, is God punishing me now? Is he punishing me now? So you go back in and start having those doubts again because you're so conditioned that way.
Those conditioned thoughts don't just evaporate.
Yeah. And a lot of times they stick around forever, right? So that's when when you kind of get back into the normal patterns of life, then you sometimes have to regroup again and kind of go back to some of those practices. And maybe you haven't meditated for quite a while, or maybe you haven't, you have to come back and refocus again and start doing some of those practices you may have neglected.
Yeah.
And, get out of the rat race of life, come back to yourself again. So yeah, I think it's an up and down, and you still have periods of pain and sadness, and obviously those don't go away. Everyone has those, right? But it's disconnecting it from, oh, this is happening because of this. Like the puppet master's up there pulling all the strings, and just realizing, no, bad things happen to everyone.
Yeah.
And there are sad times and there are good times, and it's okay. It's not God pulling strings. It's not any of that. It's just life.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of retrain yourself over and over again. It is not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
I don't think. You have to reteach yourself that again
That's
and
right.
again.
New connections in the brain in the moment, like over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes like I went to therapy for a few years and I haven't been for quite a while. And lately I've started, if I get depressed again, or if I feel like I'm confused about life again, maybe I need to restart that again for a little bit. And it's okay to go and do that and get the help for a year or whatever, and then stop again. And that's one thing that I think one of my intents I really want to focus back on again, and that is taking away the stigma of getting help, because I think especially in Mormon land, there is a lot of stigma around it. Like even admitting I went to a mental hospital, it's like, oh God, your life was messed up. You know what I mean? There's so much stigma around it. And I think just kind of normalizing it and making it okay. Like it's okay to get help. It's healthy to get help.
Yes.
And taking away the stigma and the fear around it. Because I think it's a scary thing too for a lot of people. And so I think just letting people know that's okay and it's healthy. And focusing on yourself is not a bad thing.
Right.
It is not a selfish thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that you said that. And even adding to help that it's care. Mm-hmm. It's care for yourself.
Yeah.
It's support for yourself and being alive in this world, in this moment. That it makes sense that we would all have moments where we need extra help, care, support. But I even love talking about it in the sense of like, you're deserving of this care. Mm-hmm. You just are. In this moment of suffering, you're deserving of really, highly trained care.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And then you asked about joys a little bit. So I'll talk a little bit about that.
Joys.
So one thing, like I mentioned with my purpose in life, was one part of it is experiencing joy. And this part has been so fun. And I think like with Mormonism and then raising kids and all that, like you're so busy, you just don't have a lot of time. And so one of the great gifts of leaving the church is having this time, like a Sunday. Like we were always, my husband and I were both in leadership or teaching. So we were Saturday night, we were always preparing things. Sunday night, we were all day church, teaching, meetings, whatever, right? Having a Sunday to experience living and the earth is the most joyful thing. Mm-hmm. Like when we first left, we were the type that didn't do any commerce on Sunday, right? Never ate out on Sunday or went to a store or anything. And I can't tell you the joy of us with our two daughters going to Sunday brunch. The first couple of years after we left, every Sunday we would do Sunday brunch, and having that time sitting down together and enjoying a meal, it was the most joyful thing. We loved it. Like we absolutely loved it.
We love a beautiful brunch.
Yeah. And it's so, you just aren't
Women and
allowed.
men are that they might brunch.
Yes. Yeah. And that was fantastic. And then the one thing, like we moved down to California about 5 years ago, and we have become outdoors people, which is crazy. But just enjoying the beauty of the world and the earth and just actually spending time in it has been so joyful. And then the last one I will say is, I wouldn't say I was raised this way, but I think in the church, you're taught that people in the church are good and people out of the church are okay, but the best people are in the church. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, are there going to be good people outside of the church? Like really, you kind of question that. And then you get out there and you realize, oh my God, the world is full of beautiful, wonderful people, like amazing people.
Yes.
And it's like, how did I miss this? The first 40 years of my life, I was in this bubble. And then you don't realize outside of it, the richness of life and relationships.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's so many incredible people. Yeah. So that's been really fun.
I love when you talk about joy because I feel like it just like emanates from you as you're talking about it. I'm just feeling all the joy.
Oh, good.
Vicariously.
Good.
It's very real.
Yeah. It's been good.
Well, what a delightful story, Lori Young. I know Maven and Julia are commenting in the text, and they're just saying this is a top 10, for them, feminism episode for sure. And by the way, for those who are afraid of the word feminism can be defined in like 10 words, men and women, maybe 4 words, 5, men and women should be equal.
That's it.
That's literally it.
That's it.
Nothing more than that.
Nope.
Right?
Yep. Choices.
Yeah. So anyway, this is much more than just a feminism episode, but I'm just saying what Julie and Maven shared.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
Yay, feminism.
yeah. What a powerful story. You're a delightful storyteller and such a wonderful voice.
Yeah.
I'm proud to add this to the Mormon Stories.
Oh, so
canon.
grateful.
Thank you.
So grateful.
Thank you for having me.
For your life, that you're here.
Me too.
For your experience. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the hope for people out there. Like I know there are some dark times as you're going through this. And I know where it's dark and it just doesn't feel like it's going to be any better. But, anyone who happens to be in that space, I just want to share that it can get better. It does get better. And there's so much joy to be had.
Yes.
You're like, I never knew my life would be this joyful, truly. So I hope I will seek that help and know that it's out there. And, I just want good things for people who are going through this.
Yeah. Well, what a great episode. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And I'm going to just give another plug, at least for the Food Justice Coalition in Salt Lake area, CAPSA in Cache Valley area. Mm-hmm. Again,
Wise Place is down in Orange County, California. If we got any listeners down there, it's a great organization.
And find a food for the houseless organization or a women's shelter as a starting place. But shout outs to them. And also I just want to thank all those who have applied to be on Mormon Stories. We have a new process. It involves making a short video clip. But if you go to mormonstories.org, we've got so many types of people we want to interview, but also panels that we want to do. Our Relief Society panel is coming up. We've got 4 great women. Wish we could have all the women, but 4 is the max we can do on a panel. But look for that coming up in the next few weeks. We're looking for PIMOs, physically and mentally out. We're looking for, always looking for mixed faith marriages. We're always looking for traditional, just in it to win it Mormons that want to tell their faith journey. We're looking for people who recently, served a Mormon mission, people who recently left the church. We're going to be doing young women's leaders. We're going to be doing young men's leaders. There's a big old list of types of panels or people that we want to interview. So please, there'll be a link in the show notes for how to apply to come on Mormon Stories. We would love to have you apply. And Margie, I want to thank you for helping us in that process because you've been critical in that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, I'll just say we couldn't do Mormon Stories without our donors. So, and our supporters. Please subscribe on YouTube or on Facebook or on TikTok or on Instagram. That helps with the algorithms. That spreads the word. Please like these episodes. And then our donors are what makes all this possible. So thank you to our donors. And then we lose donors, 10 or 20 regular donors every month. So if you value this type of content and you want to see it continue, please go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. And then that will help us not have to shrink or reduce our services. But be good to each other, be kind to each other, and we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.